I hate to put a damper on any discussion, but you guys had time to talk, time to argue, time to come up with questions. So now that you have, I'm just going to kind of go through the room. If you have any questions or comments or criticisms, just raise your hand, let me know, and I'd be happy to answer anything I can. So we're good to go?
Yeah, we're recording right now. Matt?
Rob had his hand up.
No, mine was... All right, cool.
Okay.
Take it away, Comrade Rob.
Okay, so one thing we thought should probably be brought up in an introduction to capitalism is what happens with capitalism over time. While there is the meritocratic presentation where we pretend and we say that people who do well and perform well are being rewarded for contributing to society and those who don't are simply not, the structure over time is that those who have money gain more money simply by having that money. The surplus value is what they can buy and purchase and then resell for a greater value over time. Whereas those who do not have money, do not have power, do not have influence, have less and less power over time. And then it creates this gap, this differentiation between the classes where it's no longer meritocratic, but reward for having money and punishment for not having money or power in the first place. Just thought that should be thrown out there, and wondering if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, actually, my comments are this. I can understand that, and most leftists want to make that critique, right? Because I didn't get into it. But one of the myths of capitalism is if you work hard, you get rewarded for that. And of course, right, there's Paris Hilton and there's the banks that got bailed out, and you can pick your example. But there's something really, I don't mean to be super critical. There's something really flawed with the leftist critique of the meritocratic state, which I think I actually addressed in the presentation, which is this notion that there's individuals over time who become strong, powerful capitalists and marginalize other people. We never had that. We never had a system of individuals competing in a market and then gaining more and more power. We have always had a system where the state has intervened and supported capitalist accumulation in order to have power. The East India Company, goes back, if I'm remembering correctly, to Elizabeth I, and the supports of that go back to Elizabeth I. And so basically the critique against, I understand why leftists do the critique of meritocracy, but I think that bites a bad hook, and that's that capitalism was ever meritocratic. And I think there's no justification for us even thinking that, just historically speaking. So I understand why people would make that critique. I'm just telling you why I didn't make that critique, is because I don't think that critique needs to be made, because there was never a time in which it was true. Right? It's a myth. Does that answer your...
Yes, though I think that in an introduction to capitalism it is still, since it is a very common belief for people who support capitalism.
Okay, fair enough.
We had a bit of confusion, right? So China ostensibly is not a communist country, and we have this notion of, Slavoj Žižek puts it, capitalism with Asian values. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you see a distinction between that and actual fascism.
Yeah, this is a really difficult question that goes to a really deep theoretical level, and it would be better served to discuss in a lecture on fascism proper. But I think the fundamental distinction, this is what keeps authoritarian capitalist regimes proper from being fascist. Although there's certainly fascistic elements that overlap, fascism needs to externalize its threat to some other. You look at any fascist regime, like declared fascist, and you have this externalization of the other. Our entire system would be absolutely perfect if only we got rid of those X. In Italy, it's anyone who doesn't support Italian nationalism. So any leftists or anarchists or syndicalists, if we just got rid of those dirty, Reds, then, Italy would be wonderful. And interestingly enough, they didn't actually have a very strong racial component. It wasn't the Jews who got most of that externalization. But in Nazi Germany, of course, the quintessential, people think of it as the quintessential example of fascism, right? If only we got rid of those dirty Jews, then our system would be perfect. In Spain, you have, if only we got rid of those dirty atheists, right, and leftists, and you get a similar thing, right, in Pinochet. I consider Pinochet's system fascist. And you get a similar feeling towards, again, atheists and leftists, and so they're summarily executed. But authoritarian capitalism doesn't concern itself with that. It doesn't think, oh, there is this class or group of people outside of our society working to undermine our society, and if we only got rid of them or killed them, then everything would work fine. They're actually much more pragmatic, which is this. We have a giant state apparatus of police and prisons, both secret and hidden, and anyone who messes, for whatever reason, with our production, with our economy, with our political system as it is, will be dealt with summarily. A good example of this, for example, as far as I understand it, there are complexities that I am not privy to in Iran, and I know that a lot of leftists will flinch when hearing this. But, for example, in Iran, the suppression of protesters, even if they are liberal, which I believe they are, right, isn't a matter of them being, at its core, you know, evil foreign agents under the pay of the United States, even if they are. The real core is you're disrupting our society, so you're going to be suppressed. You get the same thing in South Korea and the People's Republic of China. I mean, and there are fascistic elements, but it's you're messing with our production, your strike, your demand for political equality, your demand for social services, you're messing with our production. That's why you're going to disappear. So this I think is not fascistic. But I do think this is the trend towards where capitalism is headed. And we can see it around the world quite clearly. And we can also see it very easily in the United States, where slowly but surely our liberal rights are being whittled away so that if you are interfering with capitalist production, be you a leftist or a small business owner, you will face suppression of one form or another.
It's just a question of, you know, it's not a political question per se, but whatever political establishment that you have, whatever country it is or state, I think to a degree, maybe not entirely, but to a degree, that a value system, some type of system of values, has to be accounted for, and that will help determine how that political whatever is going to turn out, whether it's socialist or capitalist or communist, whatever it is. There's got to be an accounting of the actual moral fiber of that country, because, say, for some of the things I think about these days is, are there more police because, at least to a degree, because the moral fiber is having a hard time, and so they have to increase because people are making maybe not the best decisions or whatever it is, because people make poor choices. I do, a lot of people do. And so they try to enforce to keep the rules, and so they have to make more rules to keep people from making poor decisions. And so at least it has to be considered, not entirely, but considered as something to think about when developing whatever political system we come up with.